radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Wednesday, September 11th, 23 years later of that September 11th. We'll talk about that. I hope everybody is having a good week, and it's also, as it turned out, I don't know, Catalan Day or Catalan Independence Day or whatever. A lot of celebrations outdoors, parades, concerts here in Barcelona. They still want their independence. They want to be Catalans, not Spaniards. All right, the debate happened. It actually happened, right? So, very different debate than the last one, very different debate than the Trump-Biden debate. I said yesterday that, and by the way, I'll just say it, my internet connection sucks. So I'm trying something different. I'm running everything through the internet, through the iPhone. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how that works. So off of the iPhone cellular connection rather than the Wi-Fi here, which is not very good, which has been crashing all day, actually. All right, so I said yesterday that Kamala, in order to really win this debate, needed to do two things. She needed to first convince the American people that she was of the center, not of the far left. In other words, she needed to find ways to distance herself from her own positions as of 4 years ago, before she became vice president, of the period when she was in the Senate, when she was very much an advocate for kind of far left ideas, far left proposals. So she needed to present herself, convince the American people she was now a centrist. So that was number one. The second thing she needed to do was to get Trump to show the world that he was nuts. That is, to get him off kilter, and to get him to say some of the ridiculous, stupid things that he says, and to show that he's not completely there. And I think looking at the debate, she basically achieved a little bit of the first point, right? She took the opportunity a few times to distance herself from, and the second point, on getting Trump to show the world that he's not completely there, right? That he's a little nuts, or a lot nuts. She actually did that quite brilliantly. She kept poking him. She kept setting him up. And she kept returning to the things that seemed to work. And then he took over. He took over with his rants and nonsense. He couldn't stay on topic for more than 30 seconds without going on some tangent on some conspiracy theory, nutty, crazy thing that he believes or thinks. And so Trump clearly lost the debate. There's no question about that. Did Harris do everything she needed in order to win the election? No, I don't think so. She did enough to win the debate. I think pretty much every survey out there and every opinion poll and everything shows that she won the debate. And if you look at the debate, it's pretty clear. If you look at the body language, it's pretty clear. If you look at how shaken Trump was afterwards, it's pretty clear. How shaken his people were, it's pretty clear. So she won the debate yesterday. I don't think she won it in a way that guarantees her a big jump in the polls. She will get a bump. She will get a bump. But the reality is, right now, this election is tied. It's completely tied. And even if she gets a few points up in the polls, everything is within the margin of error. Basically, we're going to go over the next couple of weeks, unless you need to see a tie in all the battleground states, in the national polls, in general, and to the extent that the polls are correct, this is a coin flip. Who's going to win? It's 50-50, and it's almost impossible to say who is going to win. She, I think, helped us cause. She was, some of the momentum she got out of the convention was dissipating. I think this will give her a little bit of momentum. I think Trump hurt his cause significantly. I mean, he was terrible. And, you know, Trump is, but on the other hand, he was terrible in a way that I think most people know he's terrible, right? So his rants, his conspiracy theories, his craziness, I think everybody knows that. Maybe this reminds some people in the center, some people in the undecided. I don't think Harris did enough to convince them, that she is of the center, that she can represent a wider array of people, in order to take this win in the clearly overwhelming win in the debate and turn it into electoral votes in a significant way. How many moderate Republicans were convinced by her? How many independents were convinced by her? Maybe they were a little bit now more convinced that Trump was a nut, but I don't think that is enough, because everybody knows he's a nut. Again, I don't think we discovered new information. It was interesting and fun and humorous to watch. I'd say in the first half hour of the debate, Trump did well. And it was pretty evenly matched. And Trump was hitting hard on what I think is his strongest point: the economy, inflation. And he hit hard, and Harris came across then, as she came across later as well, as evasive and as not giving clear answers. But at some point there, Harris turned it around. She baited him, and he took the bait, right? It started with the fact, and this is before the half-hour mark, it started with the fact that Harris, basically told Trump that his generals, his Secretary of Defense, his Joint Chiefs of Staff, his national security advisors, all have said they will not support him. Last we heard, his last Secretary of Defense said he would vote for Harris. I mean, all of them, basically. And that he is dangerously unfit to be president. We're talking about all his national security people, defense secretaries, Joint Chiefs of Staff, national security advisors. That's pretty damning. She said it was a disgrace. And they thought he was a wannabe dictator. Now, Trump's response to this was hysterical. It was really good. I mean, Trump basically said, yeah, but Viktor Orban likes me. I mean, I'm sorry. It's funny. Viktor Orban likes him. So yeah, American generals, American Secretary of Defense, his own advisors on national security don't like him, don't trust him, don't believe in him. But don't worry, you know he's a good guy because Orban likes him. And just to remind you who Orban is. Orban is a prime minister that has praised Putin and blocked EU aid to Ukraine, has condemned, has basically banned same-sex marriage, has declared Hungary to be, a Christian nation, a Christianity at its core, passed, rewrote the Constitution in order to solidify his control over power, including his control over the courts, has basically seized control of the national media, arranged for all his pals to basically control every single piece of the national media, shut down and launched direct assaults on independent media, transformed Hungary from a liberal country to what he is proudly declaring as an illiberal and Christian democracy. Democracy, I think, in quotation marks. Huge inflation, highest inflation in Europe, and a recession, and indeed an economy that would barely survive if not for subsidies from the European Union, which he continuously condemns. If you compare Hungary's performance to Poland's, Hungary's performance to Czech Republic's, it's not even close. This is the guy, a semi-autocrat. This is the guy that Trump takes pride in the fact that he likes him. He likes him. I'm not even sure that's true, but it's irrelevant. But then Harris really kind of got him off track. And, she was asked about immigration. And she didn't really answer, which is par for the course for her. And she pivoted. She pivoted to saying, and I'm quoting her, this is a transcript, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And this is brilliant. This is what she did. And I'm going to do something really unusual. And I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. People start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you, right? So this line about people leaving Trump's rallies early is brilliant, because it completely discombobulated Trump. He completely lost it at this point. He lost his composure, and it was it. From this point on, Trump was the usual Trump, undisciplined, all over the place, rambling, going off in all kinds of directions, lying, like he always does, serially lying where nothing he's saying is true. Not in the conventional politician sense that I think Kamala represents, where she lies and she evades constantly. He just lies about stupid things, little things, and things that are easy to fact check, which is why the moderators ganged up on him. I mean, he really lost it. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. And then, of course, he went on to, the cats. People are eating cats in Springfield. We talked about this yesterday. They're eating cats and dogs. They're eating dogs. He didn't even mention cats. He mentioned dogs, and I think ducks and geese or something like that. And that was it. And from that point on, he basically, he doesn't exaggerate. He lies. He makes stuff up. He literally makes stuff up and pretends that it's true and says it with confidence as if it's complete truth. Nobody has ever done it the way Donald Trump does. He is the biggest, most consistent, most principled, that's not the right word, liar in American politics ever. And he's proud of it. And he doesn't mind it, because he is an explicit advocate for pragmatism. The only issue with Donald Trump is, did the lie work? If it worked, then it's okay. What's the problem? He sees no problem in it. So it's, he wants you, he's creating an alternative reality, and he's trying to convince you to buy into that alternative reality. And if he can convince you, then that alternative reality has won the day, and therefore it's fine. It's not a lie. It's not a lie. So, Trump showed what Trump is. But I don't know that it changes anything, right? I don't know in the big picture that it changes. I mean, Kamala was not great. She was good at getting him off balance, at keep hammering him and forcing him to get off balance. But she tried to articulate some kind of positive case for opportunity and whatever. She said the words, but it was hollow and it was meaningless. She walked away from the fracking point, which is good. She walked away from a few other things that she has said in the past. But Trump again was completely, I mean, Trump basically presented, and this is the one, I mean, if Kamala can figure out how to do this, this is her winning strategy, I think, is Donald Trump paints a dark picture of the future. Everything, the world is ending, particularly if he loses, right? I said yesterday, it's a contest between who can convince the audience that wins. Now, Kamala is not good for Israel. It's just made up stuff. When they try to get Trump to say whether he wants Ukraine to win, he refused. Indeed, in both cases, Ukraine and Gaza, his attitude was, yeah, we can settle this. I can cut a deal. I can make a deal. So everything about his attitude towards foreign policy is, I can make a deal. I can sit down with these guys. I can cut a deal. I can make a deal. I want the war to stop. That's true in Russia, true in Israel. And so, Kamala is a center-left, leftist, right? But if she wants to win, what she needs to present herself as having a positive vision for the future. Not this dark attitude, pointing out the good, pointing out the positives. Now, I don't know, maybe that's a losing strategy, I don't know. But again, supporting autocrats, Orban, she was evasive and with the regular leftist democratic talking points. She won her hands down because he was so bad. He was so bad. I mean, whatever discipline he might have had, it went out the window. In the first 30 minutes, as I said, I thought the discipline was there and then went out the window. He came across as the crazy, undisciplined, unfocused, all over the place person that he actually is. So he gave us an accurate picture. Whether that'll sway anybody, whether that'll convince anybody to vote against him, or to not so much to vote for Kamala, I don't know. Now, the response afterwards was predictable. Trump supporters said, oh, Trump was great, and it was 3-1, and given that it's 3-1, he did fantastic. I mean, even somebody here on the chat was giving the Trump talking points. It's 3-1. He did fine. He did the best that he could given the circumstances. She was evasive. They fact-checked him, but they didn't fact-check her. I mean, it's all true, but didn't you know that going in? And all the fact checks were true. Why did he have to bring up the eating of cats? Is that really essential? Is that really what he needs to say? He has a lot of bad points on immigration that are more convincing than the cat eating that is being debunked over and over and over again. And he goes to that. He goes to dumbest conspiracy theory out there to make his immigration point. The American people generally on his side on immigration. He doesn't have to go cuckoo in order to get them excited. He can't help himself because he is cuckoo. Trump people just flipped out because they can't acknowledge that the guy's just nuts. Now, there's a sense in which it's not surprising that he went to the crazy talking points. It turns out that his debate prep was done with this nutcase, Laura Loomer, who's a crazy conspiracy theorist, a social media personality who's nuts. And she not only helped him prep for the debate, she helped him prep for the debate. At least that's what they're saying. She also flew with him to debate. So she was on the airplane going to the debate yesterday. I mean, that's so stupid. I mean, you're not trying to appeal to the Laura Loomers of the world. You've already got them. You've got the crazy conspiracy theory people on your side. You're trying to appeal to independents and moderate Republicans and maybe some Democrats who don't like Biden and Kamala. You could do a lot better with debate prep than Laura Loomer, not very intelligent, and a conspiracy theory nut. Exactly the person who's already on your side, which says something, right? Somebody says, Trump never says the obvious things. You want him to say stupid things. Right? He's just not good. He's not good. He doesn't hold good ideas. He doesn't believe in good things. He's an anti-American supporter of our enemies. He is anti-capitalism, about as anti-capitalist as any president has ever been. He is, he's disrespectful of American institutions. He doesn't believe in the separation of powers. He's not, in spite of what he says, an advocate of free speech. He's the advocate of the exact opposite of free speech. And on top of that, he's just not completely sane. He is a narcissist who's not completely connected to reality. So yeah, he doesn't say certainly what I would. They also attack Harris because she seemed too scripted. She's annoying. She's got that annoying accent, I guess, a little bit of aloofness. She made too many faces in the first half hour as Trump is talking. She's making faces and smiling and laughing. I don't think that really helps you in a debate. I tend to do it, by the way, but I don't think that really helps you in a debate. He, on the other hand, looked like a growling bulldog when she was talking. He was like, and I don't think that helps him either. But yeah, she evaded questions and she was scripted, no question. There's already rumors that she had an earpiece and people were feeding her lines. This is how desperate the Trump supporters are. Democrats are saying Harris did a great job and Trump just gets smaller every day. The kind of political pros, the political commentators, basically saying that Harris won, not a knockout, but on points. The first debate was a knockout against Biden. Clearly, Trump knocked him out, and he was out within a couple of weeks. Here, Harris lost on points, not on knockout. Sorry, Harris won on points, not on knockout. She'll get a bump, but not much. And it's not going to be enough to tilt the election. She might win anyway because it's a toss-up and we don't know, but just not completely, not a sure thing, and not the kind of victory you need in order to guarantee you victory in November. There's still a lot to happen. It is interesting, and this tells you a lot, that Kamala has already asked for a second debate. I think they're even willing to do it at Fox. Trump has basically said no, he doesn't want another debate. And I think that makes sense for Trump. Trump can only be humiliated in debates. He is not smart, he is not fast, he is not sharp, he is not all there. And, she's younger, she's more, she's quicker, she's got that prosecutorial, instinct, and she knows how to push his buttons. So at least as of now, he is turning down the debate. She wants another debate. Yep. And, so I enjoyed it because you got to see Trump for what he is. A little person, a very small person with no ego, a complete second-hander, emotionalist who cut a deal. There'd be no war if he were president because he could cut a deal. Just no content, no real content, no real ideas. Went back to the regular tariffs and everything. A few things about the debate. And I want to say something about Springfield, Ohio. a few things about the debate. Notice the questions that weren't asked. Yesterday was September 10th, the day before September 11th. No questions about September 11th. No questions about the Islamic threat to America. No questions on how they plan to protect America from Islam. There was, Iran was brought up, but not in a serious way. And generally, here's the bigger point, right? Note the lack of seriousness on issues. The lack of actual agenda items, actual proposals, actual thinking through what those proposals mean, how they would affect the lives of Americans, what would be done. But so no 9/11, no discussion of the Islamist threat, no real analysis. You want a deal, I want a deal, I could do a deal. It's meaningless. The whole thing is just meaningless. So nothing about 9/11. And the other thing is nothing about government spending. Nothing. I mean, again, platitudes, no real analysis, no real discussion. Social Security, Medicare, any kind of resolution to how we stop them from going bankrupt? I guess I know what Trump's answer is. Tariffs. Tariffs will save Social Security, they'll save Medicare, and they will close the budget deficit, and we'll even get a, a sovereign wealth fund. I mean, the guy's that's just economic stupidity and ignorance, right? So, it's sad. I was talking to a friend 3 days ago. He's an historian. He knows a lot about kind of American history. And we were talking about the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Lincoln-Douglas debates. I mean, let me see if I remember what he said. Lincoln-Douglas debates were structured this way. This is how the debate went, right? One party gave an hour talk. The second party responded with an hour and a half response. And then the first party got a rebut with a half-hour talk at the end. Total, right, 3 hours. Each side talking, straight, not in minute sound bites, straight, for an hour and a half. I mean, one party split an hour and then 30 minutes. I mean, can you imagine? Can you even imagine? And they flipped. So one time Douglas would start, and he would get the hour, Lincoln would go an hour and a half, and Douglas would close with 30 minutes. And then Lincoln would start, and he would, and they did this, just to give you a sense of the difference, right? They did this 7 times. 7 times. All right. Trying to. So that's a Lincoln Douglas. That's 160 something years ago, right? Can you imagine American politicians today having to give an hour and a half talk? I'm not talking about a rally like Trump does, but a talk about their positions and their beliefs and how they would deal with the issues the country faces and what actually would be done. And then face a half-hour rebuttal and sit there listening to that. 3 hours, can you imagine people sitting in the audience listening to them for 3 hours? And Lincoln and Douglas were energetic. These are passionate people by all accounts, right? We don't have video, unfortunately. That would be pretty cool if we had video. But really, we've come a long way down where now it's, particularly Trump, 2-minute answers is a challenge, right? He can do about 30 seconds on a topic before he starts rambling off on some tangent, some crowd size or something about whose is bigger and whatever, right? that's about all he can handle. Even in his rallies, he doesn't stay on point. He's got the teleprompters, but he deviates on the teleprompters all the time, going off on tangents, irrelevant stuff, nonsense, conspiracy theories, all kinds of things. So yes, Shoebottom says mostly illiterate farmers who came and listened to those debates in Illinois. I don't think they weren't just in Illinois, right? They traveled around the country. Like on the, didn't they travel around the country and did the debates in a number of different places? Anyway, just give you a slight comparison of politicians of the past and politicians of the present. And it's not just Trump and Harris. All these debates, all these politicians, I mean, they're pathetic, intellectually pathetic, ideologically pathetic, and charisma pathetic. Charisma pathetic, because that's not even a term. All right. Let's see, what did I want before? We want to talk about 9/11. Oh, we talk about Taylor Swift in a second. I just read this quote from a factory CEO in Springfield, Ohio. This is the Springfield, Ohio, where Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and people on the Twitter right are claiming that immigrants are eating cats. Haitian immigrants, not just any immigrants, Haitian immigrants. This is what the CEO of this factory said, quote, "Our Haitian associates come to work every day. They don't have drug problems. They'll stay at their machines. They'll achieve their numbers. They're here to work." That's a sharp difference from what we've been used to. That's immigrants. That's the overwhelming majority of immigrants when they're allowed to work. The overwhelming majority of immigrants, and we should never forget this, in spite of all the vitriol, in spite of all the made-up stuff, and in spite of the fact that some immigrants are bad guys, no question. Some people who come here, particularly given the ridiculous nature of immigration system, some of the people who come into the country are bad guys. But let's not forget that the vast majority of them are here to work, here to create a life for themselves. They've come to make their life better. They've left hellholes to come to make their life better. They work hard. Many of you probably in one part of your life or another employ an illegal immigrant somewhere, and you do so because they do good work at a good rate. So it's easy to get caught up in the rhetoric of eating cats, of, I don't know, violence, which there's no statistical foundation of, you know, the case here, the case there, where an illegal or legal immigrant was violent. But the reality, the actual reality of what's going on is that 99.999% of them are here to make their life better and to work hard. And I don't think you should forget that. And I don't think you should let Trump and others kind of dominate this conversation and sway you from that fact. These, for the most part, are heroic people willing to risk everything in order to come to this country to make their life better. That's my view of legal and illegal immigrants. Illegal immigrants are taking a much greater risk. In that sense, they're more heroic. Oh God, that's going to be a soundbite that is going to resonate on out there, right? All right, let's see. I did that. Yeah, Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift. I mean, isn't it shocking that Taylor Swift endorsed Harris? I mean, after months of being accused of being an agent of the state, of the deep state, of the swamp, after being accused, after far-right conspiracy theorists claimed that she was an agent of the government, that her career was based on the fact that she was an agent of, I don't know, the Defense Department or something. After ridiculed and after Donald Trump claimed that she had endorsed him based on some fake meme that appeared online, it really is shocking that Taylor Swift actually came out and endorsed Harris. She endorsed Biden 4 years ago, so it shouldn't be a surprise at all. She is very, 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 for her, she claims very important female reproductive rights, abortion, contraception, IVF, so it's not surprising she would endorse a Democrat. So she did it yesterday. She signed the endorsement. Which I thought was perfect and, again, illustrative of why she would endorse a Democrat, why she would endorse Harris. She signed the endorsement. She put this up on I think, Instagram. To the millions, tens of millions of fans this year. She signed it, what was it? Childless Catwoman. Childless Catwoman. J.D. Vance wants to go around the country attacking women who choose not to have kids. If he chooses to go around the country calling them pathetic cat women, you think he's going to alienate some of them? Maybe even some that have massive followings like Taylor Swift? Yeah, you would think so. So, not a good strategy to alienate a big, a significant segment of the population out there. Taylor Swift, I think, expressed it in her endorsement of Kamala Harris. Again, does this change the election? Probably not. Everybody knew Taylor Swift was a Democrat. I don't think, except Donald Trump. Donald Trump still believed to the last minute that given that she was dating a NFL football player, can't get more American, can't get more make America great again than an American football player, a white guy too. I think Donald Trump was convinced that given she was, dating this great football player, that she would ultimately endorse him. But I think he's the only person on planet Earth who actually believed that. Everybody else knew that she was going to endorse Harris, and she did. So the suspense there, or the lack of it, or the non-existent suspense, is now officially over. Okay, let's see. I will say this. Robert just reminded me. It is true that on Twitter today, Elon Musk has gone all in on Trump. In a way that surprises me. He endorsed him, but it wasn't the warmest endorsement, and it's been getting warmer and warmer and warmer. And I think that today on Twitter, he was all over it, attacking Kamala, praising Trump, all out. Again, another notch down in my respect for Elon Musk. You can say that you're going to support Trump, you're going to say you're going to vote for Trump without going all in on him, given how pathetic he is. I'm just looking at a story here that says Harris's favorability ratings rose after the debate. That makes sense. Again, how sticky is it? And to what extent is it going to have any effect on the ultimate election? Probably hard to tell. Childless cat lady. Yep. That is how Taylor Swift signed her letter. All right, let's talk a little bit about 9/11. I'm not going to talk a lot. I've said so much over the years about it, but it is 9/11 today, and it would be strange not to commemorate it. It is still, I think, will go down as one of the most shocking days in American history. It will go down as a pivot point in American history. I think the kind of politics we have today, the kind of people we have today, I think Trump, the whole Trump phenomena, is ultimately a consequence of the response to 9/11. The feeling of vulnerability that Americans, I think for the first time, certainly since World War II, maybe ever, because even World War II didn't hit the mainland. It hit Pearl Harbor, but it didn't attack San Francisco. It didn't attack New York City. It didn't attack the Pentagon. 9/11 really created this real vulnerability. We could be attacked. We could be killed right here at home. America, greatest military force in human history. And we couldn't stop it. And you could have dealt with that vulnerability by winning, by crushing the enemy, by clearly being honest with the American people about who did it, about articulating a strategy for winning, and then executing in that strategy, by crushing the enemy and coming home. But not only did we create a vulnerability, our politicians then, went on to lie to the American people repeatedly for over 20 years about Afghanistan, about Iraq, about Al-Qaeda, about ISIS. Lied and lied and lied and lied. They never articulated a strategy. George Bush, some of you might miss him. I certainly don't. I despise the man. Never identified the enemy. I mean, there was 1 week we called them Islamic fascists. But that was the only time Islam ever came into the picture. And after a week, he stopped doing it because he got so much backlash, he couldn't stand it. Such a wimp. Never defined the enemy, never articulated who it was, never defined who funded it, who supported it, who inspired it. Afghanistan, war in Iraq, why? What did that have to do with 9/11? Again, the lies. And then we failed. We failed to protect the American people. Yes, there's been no major terrorist attack on American soil since then. And in that sense, we protected them. And the credit there goes almost entirely to our intelligence agencies. The ones that Donald Trump loves to hate, right? Constantly. But they basically prevented other attacks that have been tried. They basically disrupted the ability of Al-Qaeda and ISIS and other organizations to attack America, certainly here in the United States. But our military has failed. It's failed to defeat the enemy. It's failed to come home. And when it did try to come home, when it did come home from Afghanistan, it was an unbelievable embarrassment, unbelievable failure, which the Biden administration will go down in history as responsible for. But it's been 23 years of lies, 23 years of failures, 23 years of gutless, spineless cowardice from our leadership, 23 years of politicians, presidents, secretaries of defense, of state, and of generals in every position in our military and in every branch of our military, lying to us, deceiving us, and failing. They get a massive fail grade, all of them, in dealing with 9/11. And I think that turned the American people. It made the American people bitter, untrusting, vulnerable, convinced of America's weakness, wanting to turn insular, wanting to turn inside, forget about the world. It made the American people, open to the kind of populism, the kind of nuttiness, the kind of conspiracy theories that the Trump presidency and the Trump candidacy represent. It all really, in a significant sense, starts with 9/11. It doesn't start intellectually. It starts way before that because the intellectual foundations are laid for the Bush response. But Bush response is responsible for all of this, everything that's happened since. Now, that's not the only thing, right? That's one Bush sin that he'll never be forgiven for. He goes to hell for that one. But there's a second one, which is the great financial crisis, which he solved by bailing everybody and their brother-in-law out, which he solved by writing a blank check to Hank Paulson for $800 billion, which he solved by, massive government intervention. It was completely irrational. I mean, the whole way in which it was dealt with was irrational. So, in 9/11, American people discovered how vulnerable the United States is, if you will, militarily, And in the financial crisis, the United States discovered how vulnerable the United States is economically. And those two strikes against us America are what have laid the foundation for where we are today. Oh, I see we've got some Trump supporters on board. I mean, the debate was as biased as you'd expect it. It was an ABC. What do you expect? You'd think that Trump would be prepared and would have been prepared for a biased debate. He knew what kind of questions they were going to ask. He knew they were going to be tougher on him than on her. I mean, what else would he expect? So, to the extent that they got away with the bias, and the extent that they unfazed him, to the extent that he couldn't handle it, to the extent that he folded under the pressure, that's him. That's him. None of this was surprising. None of this was new. None of this should have shocked anybody. What do you expect? Deal with it. You agreed to do it in ABC. You agreed to have muted mics. You agreed to this format. So prep for it and have good answers and have good responses and have good ways of dealing with the bias and attack Kamala. Trump spoke, in spite of the bias, Trump spoke a lot more than Kamala. You can look at the number of minutes. And Kamala attacked Trump more, spent more time attacking on the attack than Trump did. She basically took a page out of Trump's own handbook. She played this really, really well, and he did a lousy job. And if you can't see that, if you're so partisan, if you're so, I have to defend Trump no matter what, then you're blind in your mind, and you're losing your independent mind. But it's clear that she had a strategy that she executed on, and he failed. His strategy failed. It doesn't matter who the moderators are. I mean, indeed, I've done a lot of debates, and usually the moderator's against me. Indeed, I've had debates where the moderator is so shocked by what I've just said, he expresses the shock, right? It becomes very quickly 2 against 1. So what? So you handle it. You keep going. You don't fall apart like George Bush, like Donald Trump did. Right? Donald Trump fell apart. But their policy agenda is not going to be reflected. So Mark says it's all theater. People need to understand what their policy agenda is. But what is their policy agenda? Their policy agenda is, when I get into power, I'll wing it. There is no policy agenda. Does Trump have a policy agenda? Are there things that Trump believes in other than tariffs that he would actually do, that we know he would do? He'll wing it, just like he did the first time. He winged it until winging it during COVID caused him to fall flat on his face and became a disaster. He caused the disaster of COVID. COVID was not caused from the outside. It was caused by Trump, by Trump's administration, by him primarily. And what is she going to do? It's likely she won't have a Senate or a House. One of those will be Republican. So she can have all the agenda items. She can say all the stuff that she wants to say. What she actually get done? Very little. If Republicans can stand up to her, you think they would be able to if they had a majority in one of the houses. So the most important thing about a president are the things that he can do unilaterally. What can a president do unilaterally? Foreign policy, immigration to some extent, right? And tariffs to some extent. I think on those three, on foreign policy, I don't know, it's a tie. They're both terrible. On immigration, Kamala's better. And on tariffs, Kamala's better. And that's the only thing a president can do by themselves. Right. Yeah, she might waffle an extreme left agenda. She might go more left, extreme left. But what can she actually get done? Very little. Yes, woke in government. She will maintain wokeness in government, as wokeness is fading everywhere else. She will maintain wokeness in government. He will not. He will get rid of wokeness in government. Okay, that's a big plus for Trump. Will either of them shrink government spending? No evidence of that. Will either of them, Trump will deregulate at the regulatory agency level, which he did last time. Will he deregulate through legislation? He won't be able to because Democrats will control probably one of the houses. So there's not much they can do, particularly given that they're not passionate advocates for something. Now, Ronald Reagan could get things through a Democratic Congress because he was passionate about it. He went out there and he did the work and he pounded the pavement and he got stuff done because he needed to. Trump never goes to ask Congress really for anything. He didn't really work well with them. He couldn't even get Obamacare appealed. What was it? She asked him about what his replacement for Obamacare would be, and he said he's working on it. He's got the principles, but he's working on it. What are they? He wouldn't articulate. And he's had 8 years to work on it. And he still doesn't have a plan to repeal Obamacare and replace it with what? So policy doesn't, the reality is policy doesn't actually matter because neither of them have any. She is more leftist than him, no question about that. All right, let's see, what else do we want to talk about? Yeah, let's do this story about housing, and then we'll do a couple of positive stories. All right, so, if you look at the U.S. economy, and you look at the angst that everybody feels out there in the U.S. economy, and particularly relative to Europe and Japan, where the U.S. is kind of crushing economic performance relative to Europe and Japan, and has since 2008. The big difference, though, between our economy and their economy is the United States has seen a massive increase in housing prices to the extent that it's very difficult for people to buy a first house, and it's very difficult for people to upgrade their house. So there are real challenges that I think Americans face that Europe and Japan don't quite have with the same kind of intensity. So, for example, if you look at house prices adjusted for inflation, since 2008, they're up about 2% in Europe. 2% over the last, 16 years. They're up 25% in Japan, but they're up 50% in the United States in the last 24 years. Inflation adjusted. Real prices in the U.S. right now are 25% higher than what they were in 2006, if you remember the peak of the bubble. So we're way above the bubble. But this is the difference. In 2006, it was a bubble. It was a bubble that was created by speculation. Prices today are not bubbly. They're not high because it's a bubble. Prices today are high. In 2006, my hairdresser, the woman who cuts my hair, owned 3 homes. 3 homes. I don't know how she could afford one. She owned 3 because she had 0 down mortgages on all of them. And she was juggling all of that. And once the crisis hit and interest rates went up a little bit, she couldn't pay it off. She had a default on them. But now that's not the case. Now prices are high, and not because of speculation, not because I think of low interest rates. Interest rates are not that high, not that low right now. There's a simple reason. And that is, in the United States, we don't build enough homes. I keep saying this, and yet it seems like it needs repeating over and over and over again. We're not having lots of kids. There's still household formation. The United States has immigration, so the number of households in the U.S. is growing, which is good, right? But because of, because we still subsidize home ownership with generous federal mortgage lending subsidies, we subsidize it through the tax deductibility of interest on mortgages. So on the one hand, we stimulate demand. We tell people, go buy a house. Here, we're going to subsidize your house. By the way, all of you, if you've got a mortgage, you're being subsidized. There's no way your mortgage rate is a real market rate. It's all subsidized by the government through Fannie and Freddie, who still are bigger today than they've ever been, right? And you get that tax deduction for your mortgage payment. So we subsidize demand. And then at the local level, we restrict supply. Restrict supply. We are building, basically, very few new homes. We're building 80% fewer entry-level homes than 50 years ago. And we're basically building the same number of homes generally as 50 years ago. Most of them not new entry homes. The time it takes to build a condo building, a multi-unit condo building for rent or for sale has doubled because of regulation. And most of that's happened in the last 20 years. The not in my backyard resistance to building has spread dramatically. Since 2000, according to Zillow, the average household income has doubled, but the average price of its listings has tripled. Over that period, the time it takes to save for a 20% down payment has risen by nearly half to 11 years. The share of income that goes to mortgage and insurance payments has risen by more than a third to 35%. So developers are building homes much slower than Americans are forming new households. There's a massive shortage of hundreds of thousands of residents every single year. When you have limited supply and subsidized demand, prices go up. And prices go up, that creates homelessness. Prices go up, that creates a sense of quality of life and standard of living going down. It creates angst. It creates adults who are still living with their parents because they can't afford a home. They can't afford rent. Multifamily units are not getting built, so there's no rentable units. Or rents are not going down, have gone up a lot. This is a completely 100% government-created problem, regulatory-created problem. Mostly at the local level, but also at the federal level to a large extent because we subsidize housing. And notice that nobody's talking about this. I mean, Kamala is talking about, right, we already subsidize demand, but she's talking about let's subsidize it even more, as if subsidizing demand more will solve the problem. I mean, this is unbelievable economic ignorance. If she gives first-time homeowners $25,000 each to buy a new home, guess what happens to the price of the homes? They go up by $25,000. Supply is restricted. If you're not willing to pay $25,000 more because you have $25,000 for the government, I'm going to raise my price by $25,000. And so is everybody else. You don't solve these problems by doubling up on what caused them. Subsidies for buying a home. You solve these problems by getting rid of the things that created it. Get rid of the subsidies, get rid of Freddie and Fannie, get rid of tax deductibility of mortgage interest. I know that's probably unpopular. And stop restricting building. That has to happen on a local level. Federal politicians have very little they can do about it unless they pass laws that say you cannot zone for single family. You cannot do this, you cannot do that on a federal level, but that would cause everybody who believes in state rights to flip out. Anyway, housing prices, 100% government-created problem, and nobody, not Trump, not Kamala, not anybody I know in government is actually proposing a solution to it. Some states, surprisingly California a little bit, have moved to restrict the ability of local governments to zone so that more multifamily homes are built and there's more housing that enters the supply chain. But it's still way too rare, and there's still way too many regulations. All right. Let's see where we are. All right, we're doing pretty well in the super chat. That's good. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Let me thank some of our stickers. I think we had some stickers. Mark, thank you. Really appreciate it. Let's see. Who else do we have? I'm just scrolling down. Mark again. Thank you, Mark. Whoops, I skipped somebody. Mike and Paul and Martin and Mary Eileen. Thank you guys. Really, really appreciate it. All right. Reminder that if you don't support the show already on a monthly basis, please consider doing so. You can do it on Patreon. You can do it at yaronbrookshow.com/membership. You can do it, that's through PayPal. That is incredibly valuable. It keeps the show going. It's regular monthly income. It is an expression of the value you believe this show represents in your life. So please consider doing something, based on what you can afford and based on the value you think you get from this show. Value for value. So this show couldn't exist without the support of listeners, watchers like you. Those of you who are on YouTube, you've already done a pretty good job already tonight with the super chat. We're almost at halfway for the second for the total. So please consider, not consider, just keep at it. Keep asking questions. Keep giving, supporting with stickers. We've got 155 people, I think, watching right now. We've been up to as high as 200. So there are a lot of people on board right now who are watching, who could be supporting the show. There are probably a bunch of you out there who are listening right now live, who have not yet supported the show. Here on YouTube, you can do so with a sticker right now. And again, become a trader with me. Or you can go to Patreon or PayPal and support me that way. All right. Quick reminders in terms of our sponsors. We got John Bobbin, Fahy Life, PHILIFE, doing exercise, nutrition, health, diet, all these issues that you get so much conflicting information about. He kind of synthesizes and integrates it and presents to the best of his knowledge. He's been in the industry for decades. The information to you personalized in a way that you can then take it and test it and try it out in the world out there. I highly recommend doing that. Signing up. The link is down there on YouTube. You can just check out Fahy Life on YouTube and subscribe. Subscribe to John's channel. Ayn Rand Institute, aynrand.org/start here. We're really promoting the Australia conference. Please consider signing up. I know I have listeners in Australia. I know you're out there, guys. Please sign up for this conference. It would be great to have you at the conference. Those of you who might be students who can't afford the tuition to go to the conference, you can apply for a scholarship. aynrand.org/start here. You can apply for the scholarship and you can come. I'll be there speaking. Nikos will be there. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I really encourage you to come. It'll be the biggest conference, Objectives conference ever in Australia. You don't want to miss that, and you want to help make it the biggest Objectives conference in Australia. So help us. And finally, Alex Epstein, of course, the number one, the best voice on issues related to climate change, environmentalism, fossil fuels, and energy more broadly in the world today. Check him out, alexepstein.substack.com. Many of our politicians get these talking points. They get the Substack. They even sign up for Alex AI, where you can ask the AI questions. It's being trained on Alex, and it will give you an Alex answer. Pretty cool. All right, let's jump in here to our questions. Again, thank you for all the people who've submitted questions, and questions are still open. You can still submit. Let's see, Jason, $50. Thank you, Jason. 2 pipe dreams, both flawed. One where Cheney or Bolton join a Harris administration, and one where Yaron Brook builds ties between MAGA and Objectivists? The answer is clear. Thanks for the juxtaposition. Schwarzenegger for Secretary of State. All right, let me see. Pipe dreams. One is where Cheney or Bolton join a Harris administration. I don't. You won't see a Bolton joining a Harris administration. Not because I don't think Bolton would agree to do it. I think he would. I think Harris would never take him. He's just too good. He's just too good. I mean, this is why he couldn't survive in a Trump administration, because he's just too good. He's the best within the world of conventional people in politics. He's the best on foreign policy. He's not great, but he's the best we have on foreign policy. Maybe Cheney, Liz Cheney. But, you know, I don't know that I like Liz Cheney on issues. I like Liz Cheney in her opposition to Trump. I don't know that I like her on any particular issues. And but Kamala has said she will have a Republican in her cabinet. It'll be interesting to see what kind of position they have and how important that is. Yaron builds ties between MAGA and Objectivists. God forbid. That will never happen. That will never happen. Jason's trying to get Kamala electable from the center. Yeah, I mean, she would have to bring somebody in now. I mean, what she could have done. I mean, look, it's still mind-boggling to me. Every time I look at the polls, one thing is very evident. If Kamala Harris wants to win the presidency, she has to win Pennsylvania. She might be able to win it if she wins North Carolina instead. She had an opportunity to nominate the governor of Pennsylvania or the governor of North Carolina as her vice president. And she passed on it. And that, if she loses this, that will be the decision that lost it for her. If she had Shapiro on the ticket right now, instead of this clown, Walz, who's the governor of Minnesota, is a clown and he's a leftist. If she had Shapiro on there, she'd, I think, be the favorite to win. Because she probably would have nailed Pennsylvania. He's very popular in Pennsylvania. And Shapiro is clearly a centrist. So she would have nailed kind of a reputation as moving to the center. Instead, she chose to beef up her left flank with Walz from Minnesota, which she's going to win anyway. So, yeah, I don't get it. I don't get it. And if you don't take Shapiro in Pennsylvania, then take, what's his name, Cooper? Whatever his name is, in North Carolina, because that gives you a shot at North Carolina. He's, again, very popular in North Carolina, in spite of being a Democrat in a relatively red state. And he's a centrist. He won as a Democrat in a very red state. Both of those, or even the senator from Arizona, any of those were no-brainers as compared to Walz. She needed a centrist. She needed to beef up a centrist credentials. Now, she could have gone completely radical and chosen a Republican as a VP. That would have really, yeah, there it is. But unlikely. All right, David, $100. Thank you, David. Do you follow Walter Russell Reed? He thinks Tucker's Nazi revisionism can't be refuted by Victor Davis Hanson's fact-checking because it's a cultural tribal issue. Also, can you admit that pragmatism has a place in foreign policy? I used to follow Walter Russell Mead after 9/11. He wrote a few very incisive essays, and I think I read one of his books on the Muslim world, which was very good and very incisive and very interesting. I haven't really followed him since. Now, he thinks Tucker's Nazi revisionism can be refuted by Victor Davis Hanson's fact-checking because it's cultural tribal issue. Okay, so that's confusion, right? What do you mean by refuted? Tucker's Nazi revisionism has been refuted, is refuted by reality. It's refuted by facts. And Victor Davis Hanson I think actually Neil Ferguson did a much better job at refuting them. I thought Victor Davis Hanson was relatively weak on this. But both Victor Davis Hanson and Neil Ferguson actually did refute it. Now, if what Walter Russell means is that you can't convince with facts, you can't convince with refutation, then I agree with him. People who support Tucker, people who support this clown Cooper, people who think he's an historian, are not doing it on the basis of facts. They're not doing it on the basis of history. They're doing it on the basis of tribalism. They're doing it on the basis of getting a kick out of being different. And for some of them, they're doing it on the basis of ideology, where they are already committed white nationalists or white supremacists or semi-Nazis. And in that sense, facts won't shift them. And there is no way to argue with them because they're not interested in facts. They wouldn't have been attracted to these ideas. They wouldn't be attracted to Tucker. If you're attracted to Tucker, you're not interested in facts. If you're a regular watcher of Tucker, you're not watching him for facts. You're watching him for tribal security, for tribal energy, for tribal boost, not for factual stuff. So in that sense, yes, I think Walter Russell Mead is right if that's what he means by it. It's a completely cultural tribal issue. And again, part of what makes Tucker acceptable, part of what makes Nazism in the Cooper kind of version of it acceptable is that it's anti-left. And it's all in the context of a cultural war. It's all in the context of being anti-left. And as long as you're anti-left, then you're okay. Then you can question anything, you can ask any question, you can open any case. Narcissism has a place in foreign policy. I don't know how to say this. No, 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 no. Now, practicality has a place in foreign policy. That is, what is practical, what is doable, what is achievable is important in foreign policy. Pragmatism has no place anywhere. Pragmatism is the rejection of principle. Pragmatism is the rejection of long-term thinking. Pragmatism, by its very definition, is the rejection of reason. The rejection of reason, the rejection of principle, the rejection of the long term, the rejection of the rational has no place anywhere in any context. Any time. Now, practicality, yes. You have to think of what can be achieved, short term and long term. How should I consider it? How to act on it. But all in the context of principle, because only principle will tell you whether it's practical in the long run. Principles are based on what is practical. So, yes, if it's the reality, which I don't think it is, that Ukraine cannot beat Russia, they cannot pull them out, then realpolitik is pragmatism. I reject realpolitik completely, thoroughly, from beginning to end. I'm not realpolitik. I'm not a neocon, I'm not realpolitik, I'm not any conventional category of foreign policy. I believe in, from America's perspective, a true America first foreign policy, a principled American foreign policy that is focused on American self-defense. Each country has to have its own principled foreign policy that takes into account the context in which it exists, the context of its own abilities and power and what the opposition has. But take, for example, Ukraine. Let's say Ukraine came to the conclusion, there's no way we can win this. Then yeah, they might have to cut a deal with Russia. But they would have to find a way to cut a deal with Russia from a position of strength. One of the reasons, I think, that they've invaded Russia, they've taken vast, relatively large swath of land from Russia in Kursk, is to be in a position of strength when they negotiate a deal, ultimately, just in case they can't push the Russians out of Ukrainian territory. Now, I think they can win. Good guys can win, almost always, if other good guys in the world help them out. Like if we allow them to use our weapons properly, then they can win. But I'm not a realpolitik. Realpolitik is pragmatism. Almost all foreign policy theories today are pragmatist. And they're all wrong. And they're all bad. I mean, Henry Kissinger is one of the most horrible, disgusting, evil secretaries of state that we've ever had. Horrible. He's responsible for the decline of American strength. He's responsible for all kinds of things, from sustaining the Soviet Union longer than it needed to be sustained, to handing South Vietnam to North Vietnam, to prolonging the conflict in the Middle East, preventing Israel from actually winning and defeating. He's a bad guy because of his realpolitik, because of his pragmatism. Now, you have to have the right. Of course, Ukraine can win. I mean, Russia could go nuclear, but Russia will not go nuclear because Russia knows the consequence of going nuclear. Ukraine is a corrupt, garbage country we should not be involved in. I'm sure you've been to Ukraine. I'm sure you know many Ukrainians. I'm sure you've traveled around Ukraine. And I'm sure you've been to Russia. I mean, if you compare Ukraine to Russia, Ukraine is a haven of uncorrupt liberalism. Russia is the hellhole. But no, I'm a huge supporter of Ukraine. Ukraine was moving in the right direction. It was moving towards the West. It was moving towards becoming a Western country. It was moving towards Western values. And that, more than anything else, is why Putin invaded, because Ukraine was becoming too Western. And that's what he was afraid of. He's not afraid of NATO. He's afraid of Western cultural influence on his border, not afraid of nukes on his border. Then nukes can travel across borders. He's afraid of the cultural influence that if Ukraine flipped to the West, maybe Russians would start demanding flipping to the West as well. And that was not tolerable. So no, Ukraine can win. Putin would not go nuclear because he knows the consequence of going nuclear. He's not that suicidal. And Ukraine can push them out. And that's what winning means. Could push them out. All they need is, they needed the weapons in time, and they needed the ability to use the weapons freely. But there's a big difference. Russia is an enemy of the United States. And Ukraine is potentially a friend. And since we care about American interests, we should support Ukraine against our enemy. John, Yaron, if requested, Creating Christ, How Roman Emperors Invented Christianity, a book by C.W. Fahy and James Valliant, would you review it? And how much would that cost for you to do it? It's 390 pages long. I don't know. Let me think about it, John. I'll answer. I think you sent me an email about this. I'll answer your email. I don't know how much I would ask to review it. It's not a book that is on my urgent reading list. It's not a book urgently on my reading list for a variety of reasons. But I guess I would read it for the right amount of money. So let me think about that. And also, I'm not an historian. So if you're looking for me to review it from the perspective of, do I think it's true historically, I don't know that I'm qualified to do that. I could tell you generally what I thought and my impressions based on my knowledge of that history and my reading of other books and my just understanding of the world. I could give you that as a non-definitive commentary from my part. So, Andrew, Rand said once that the cultural atmosphere involved a pale of fear without object that relates to your observation that to the extent reason is diminished, people feel afraid. Does altruism also add to a culture of fear? Yes, in many, many ways. But look, anything that undermines self-esteem, is going to increase fear. Certainly a diminishing of reason, a respect for reason, and a knowledge of what to do with reason, right? How to be rational. It diminishes one's confidence in being able to survive, and therefore diminishes one's confidence, one's self-esteem, and therefore increases fear. But the whole idea that one's life morally should be in the service of others, should be there to serve others, reduce the self-esteem, your self-confidence. Basically, my moral code is telling me I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy of life. I'm not worthy of happiness. And that diminishes, again, one's self-esteem, one's confidence in myself and one's reality. To the extent one pursues your own, to the extent that one pursues your own self-interest, you feel guilty about it. Guilt that you can't really understand, that you don't want to put into words because you don't want to face the morality that you actually hold and that you're contradicting it. All of that encourages fear. All of that encourages fear. I do think the dominant part that has changed over the last 20 years, let's say, I think is the reason. It's the lack of rationality. It's the elevation of emotion. It's the celebration of the emotion, particularly among young kids, particularly in our educational institutions and in our colleges. So you can see that in the identity politics and the refuge they take in the group, in the tribe. Yaron, how do you see a Trump administration with regard to Israel? Any major differences from the Dems? I mean, it depends on who is advising Trump. So my view is Trump is a lot more susceptible to influence from the Saudis and the Qataris and the UAEs, kind of the kind of people he likes, people with power and money and authoritarians. He is, you saw that with Erdogan, the leader of Turkey. Trump was, very, very accommodating to the authoritarian in Turkey, and willing to turn his back on our allies in order to appease him. On the other hand, he had in the past advisors who were very pro-Israel and who influenced them in the direction of Israel. He does have the evangelical community that he's very close to for some bizarre reason that is very pro-Israel, at least for now. I don't know how long that'll last. You can see the elements of evangelicalism abandoning Israel in people like Candace Owen and Tucker Carlson and so on, who've turned Catholic. I think part of that is turning Catholic, maybe, is to be anti-Israel. But so I think in one respect he'll be tough on Iran, although he wants to kind of deal with Iran. He wants to negotiate a deal with Iran. He'll say he's with Israel, but he'll also want Israel to cut a deal with Hamas. See, he doesn't see it as black and white. He sees it as, no, Hamas can be dealt with. We can deal with Hamas. We can cut a deal. We can sit down with them. We can have a deal. We can release those hostages. We can have a deal. He sees everything in terms of deal. So I would say generally better than the Democrats on Israel, but not night and day, not like a massive difference. He doesn't particularly like Netanyahu because I think Netanyahu has talked back to him on occasion and has done things he didn't like congratulate Biden when he won. But I'm not sure Netanyahu is going to be prime minister for very long. It's hard to tell. So I think he's better than the Democrats on Israel, but not by a huge margin, and not as good as he was in the first term. I think his second term he'll be less good. He proposed a peace deal between the Israelis and Palestinians, And he criticized for the Israelis for not being enthusiastic about it. He might want to push his peace deal again on Israel and on the Palestinians, which is probably not a good idea. The Godfather. Donald J. Trump just endorsed a sovereign wealth fund. God. What is a sovereign wealth fund? How do they work? What are the pros and cons of them? Which other countries have sovereign wealth funds? Are sovereign wealth funds moral? Why and why not? I am so confused in this. It's not very confusing. There are no pros to a sovereign wealth fund, only cons. They're not moral. So what are they? A sovereign wealth fund is typically created by a government that has excess revenue. That is, that has a lot more revenue than it has stuff to spend it on. And there are a few governments like that in the world. Norway. Norway gets massive revenue, the government gets massive revenue from oil in the North Sea. Massive. It's got a small population. Norway's a small country, small population. And they decided that instead of just taking their money every year and spending on its citizens or cutting their taxes and only using the money they get from the North Sea revenue for government spending, instead, they would give some of it to the citizens, and everybody gets a check, in a sense, but then the rest they will put away into a fund, and then called a sovereign wealth fund. They will then invest that money in stocks and bonds and different securities all over the world. They'll have a globally diversified portfolio of securities. And then that money to improve. The Saudis have a massive sovereign wealth fund. Again, because they have huge amounts of oil revenue. They don't want to actually give it to their citizens, who are generally poor. Saudis are generally poor people. They don't want to give it to the citizens. They want to be able to control it. And so they create this sovereign wealth fund. And instead of it being used for government expenditures, it is again a fund that's invested in a variety of different things. One of the things that it invests in Saudi Arabia is, for example, it's investing in the Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, I think all have sovereign wealth funds, I think, because they all have this massive inflow of cash, money, on an annual basis from oil, which they choose not to spend or not to give to their own citizens, but rather, and remember, these are countries where mineral rights are owned by the government. There are no, individuals don't own mineral rights. Companies don't own mineral rights. The mineral right period which has excess revenue, overspending, and it's created this reserve fund for rainy days. It's a rainy day fund. It'll help pay for pensions if the state struggles. And I think Singapore has one. I don't know of any other country that has one. I don't know of any Western country that has one other than Norway. Because I think that sovereign wealth funds are really bad because they detach. I want governments to struggle to find the money to spend, to have to convince the voters if they're going to spend more to raise their taxes. I don't want the government to have this. If the United States had a sovereign wealth fund, let's say it had, $1 trillion in a fund, now it becomes the largest investor in the stock market. You can imagine now businessmen lobbying the government to have the government invest in their stock. Business now, it's a huge, it's a huge avenue for massive cronyism, even more than we have today. Even more than we have today. Right? So I think it's a bad idea. I think it's bad for Norway. I mean, imagine if that money was handed out to Norwegian citizens and they were actually just richer. And they could decide how to allocate it. They could decide how to invest it. Or, even better, imagine if those rights were somehow private and not the Norwegian government's, and they went to businesses who actually drill the oil and get it out of there. Now imagine if the United States had one. Now first, where would the United States get the money for it? We're running trillions of dollars in deficits. We can't balance the budget. Where's the money going to come from to put in a sovereign wealth fund? You'd have to either raise more taxes dramatically, you'd have to borrow more money, but even then, you can't borrow enough to do it. And to create a sovereign wealth fund off of borrowed funds is completely distorted and perverted. So, and again, imagine how they would influence markets. So no, government's purpose, only purpose, is the protection of individual rights. Sovereign wealth funds are the exact opposite. They require stealing money from your own citizens. They require taxation and dramatically increased taxation. And if one year you have a surplus, you have more money than you have, then pay back down the debt, buy back your bonds, or return the taxes to your citizens. Never, ever, ever let the government invest money. It's a terrible, terrible idea, practically and morally. Thomas. In 1980, Bay Area housing cost 10% above the national average. Since then, the Bay Area population has grown by 45%, while the supply of available housing has grown by 4%. Doesn't this basically explain the whole problem? Yes. So the demand for the housing in the Bay Area has gone up dramatically. Supply has stayed flat, further out and further out and further out. And the Bay Area does not build high, does not build multi-story units. There are very few condos, everything's single family, and it's zoned for single family. So even if you wanted to build tall, condominiums or rental properties, you can't. You're not allowed to. You won't get it. And the regulations are so harsh that the cost of building is high. So yeah, so that explains everything. Plus, if you add to that, the cost of building a home has gone up a lot because of regulations. That's the whole story. It's all a supply and demand story. Rand says, I think she chose Walz because he was the only finalist that wouldn't intimidate her intellectually. He's as lightweight as she is. I think that's right. But again, I mean, that's the kind of choices losers make, right? Winners choose what will win, and even if that means that it'll challenge them, even if that means it'll make them uncomfortable. But if you want to win, you have to be uncomfortable sometimes, and you have to be challenged sometimes. She is a loser, and that choice was a losing choice. And if she loses the election, it'll be that choice. I don't know if that will be the determining factor, but I think, God, if she loses Pennsylvania, certainly that'll be pointed as a big factor. On the woke right today, it was great because he takes direct aim at Tucker rather than focusing on Daryl Cooper. Yes, I actually saw the essay he put out on it. Before, I haven't seen the video yet. I couldn't read the whole essay because I think you have to buy a subscription or something to read the whole essay. But it really looked good. I agree with him, but on a lot of things, he's very, very good. And he doesn't want to interview me for some reason. That's a black mark on his soul, I guess. He should really have me on trigonometry, but he doesn't want me. What can I do? All right, let's see. All right, pace of super chats have slowed. Still looking for about $50 for this hour. $50 for this hour. Let's see if we can make it up in the next 20 minutes. If we can make $50 in 20 minutes. Should be doable. We got 146 people watching. We could, if somebody wanted to start even a $1.99 sticker campaign, we could get there pretty easily with, $50. Divide by 2, 25 people. All right, let's see. Alex, do you know much about Lee Kuan Yew, the first Prime Minister of Singapore? I recently came across some interviews, lectures by him, and was intrigued. Any thoughts about him as a political figure? Yes, I mean, he's obviously a super interesting guy, unbelievably successful, took a backwater, an Asian backwater, and turned it into one of the wealthiest places on planet Earth, mostly by adhering to principles of freedom, but not exclusively. There's a lot of restrictions in where he thinks the people in power can guide the society in the right way, but not too much. So, for example, in economics, he okay, is audio back? Audio back, audio back. Audio back. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we got back. All right, where was I? What was the last thing I said, guys? Because I talked for a long time after you said no sound. No sound. So did you hear any of my answer? Any of my answer on Lee Kuan Yew? Lee Kuan Yew. Yeah, dude. Anyway, so yeah, I was answering. Can you answer again? There was no sound. Okay, so an amazing system. You got to give him credit for the worked. It's not my preferred system. I would strongly prefer Hong Kong. Hong Kong is freer and actually saw even more economic growth than Singapore. But what Lee Kuan Yew showed, and what the Chinese try to mimic but couldn't, is that even when you restrict certain political freedoms, if you allow for economic freedoms, let people keep the money they own, don't tax them heavily, let people start businesses easily, don't regulate, don't control, don't start to stifle. Maybe prod a little bit, subsidize here and there, but not too much, very limited. So if you can promote an economic system that is basically free, or is about as free as any economic system is in the world, and by the way, no tariffs, complete open trade, same as Hong Kong in that sense, then you can create a lot of wealth, and you can create happy people, even if they really don't have a right to vote. There's really no voting. There was no voting in Hong Kong, by the way. The difference is in Hong Kong you had free speech. In Singapore you have crime that has no victim, like drug crime, very tough, or chewing gum in the street, not good. Don't do that. You could get flogged. So the combination of toughened crime and open economics, relative free markets, and limited civil rights, it works, at least for a while. Now, how long it'll work for, I don't know, but it works for a while. Now, I think Singapore could have been even great. But Singapore's an amazing place. It's clean, really clean. It's unbelievably safe, and a great place to do business. Great place to do business, and people seem to be really happy there. Yeah, no tariffs, no restrictions on trade. Huge part of Singapore's success. So overall, he did a great job. Will that job, will future leaders of Singapore be able to maintain that? I don't think so. More controls of the economy, higher taxes. They're already succumbing to some of the temptations that come with political power. I don't think it's sustainable. He was a unique character that could pull it off. Once in a while, you get kind of a benevolent dictator, but that's rare and you can't count on it, and it won't last. I haven't seen his thoughts on religion, but I think religion is pretty easy. I'm against it. There's lies to back her. What lies? Accepted of Kamala's. I mean, I know she lies. I completely agree that she lies. But what lies of hers have I accepted? Name. Give me a list. Give me one. Give me two. I mean, it's easy to say that. But no, I don't accept any of Kamala's lies. I have my own views, which mostly disagree with Kamala. But the things that Kamala says about Trump, I agree with completely. She's completely right about Trump. All her criticisms of Trump were 100% right. I mean, I'm curious what you think of criticism of Trump she got wrong. Whoops. And for example, the Charlottesville thing that she accused him of, that everybody flipped out over. I've done a whole video showing that she's right on the show, so you can go check it out. And I did that before Kamala said it. So no, I don't believe any of Kamala's lies. No, don't say that. Don't say that. I don't miss Bush. Bush I hated. Bush will be the pivotal figure in American history that brought us to this point. He is the guy responsible for the disaster that was post 9/11, and he is the guy responsible for the financial crisis, for the response to the financial crisis. He will never be able to redeem, even if every president is worse than him. He's the guy who got us here. All right, guys, we are $37 short of where we need to be. So somebody do 25 and 12. How about that? That'd be good. And I did notice that John tried to get us going with the $2 stickers. He did $2, and he was hoping that you guys would join him. We've got 140 watching. $2 stickers. That would be cool. As a trade, just $2 for this show. So maybe if a bunch of you did $2, we'd get that $37. Huram. Are Israeli farmers really in a lot of financial trouble? I met one yesterday and provided them with custom carryable power banks to keep their phones and USB devices going or being on the go. That's great. I think Israeli farmers are struggling. I think the Israeli economy is struggling. It's a war economy, which is not a good economy for private enterprise. It's particularly not a good economy also for local consumption. It's very difficult right now in Israel economically. And Israel's going to have to figure out how to get out of it, particularly once the war is over. But and there's also challenges with farming in Israel. It's an industry that's protected. There's way too much import controls, tariffs, limitations on trade. I'd like to see Israel open up to the world much more and eliminate all the barriers to trade and eliminate all the tariffs and bring real competition to Israeli markets, even if that creates some angst among farmers, which it probably will. Andrew, it doesn't matter who I root for, but I've reached a point that I'm rooting slightly for Kamala, only on the grounds of hoping a Trump loss will spur a move towards a slightly more rational GOP. Yeah, I mean, the problem is, as I've said many times, that if Trump loses a little bit, he'll claim it was cheating and MAGA will stay in control of the GOP. The other option is if Trump loses, MAGA will say, well, it was the candidate. It wasn't the ideas, it was the candidate. Now, whether the ideas can sustain the loss of this particular candidate, I don't know. But I just don't think the GOP is going to be easily saved. Robert, battle of the new money billionaires, Taylor Swift versus Elon Musk. Who'd have thought? Elon has more dollars than Taylor, but hers didn't require subsidies. true, but she is an agent of the deep state. But who has a bigger following? I think it's Taylor Swift. But who has a platform? I think it's Elon. Yeah, it's a curious battle. We'll see who wins. Andrew says, I respect the Taylor Swift more hearing these lines from like some kind of congressman. Tailed as old as time. That's pretty good. That is pretty good. Did you hear my covert narcissism I disguise as altruism like some kind of congressman? Good for Taylor. I didn't know she was that political. Let's see, we get another $2 Carilisto the Uncanny. Wow. The Uncanny gave $2 and Ginger Clark did $2. So chipping away, another $2 and we're there. Whoops. Andrew says, you covered this, but Trump didn't lose because of the moderators. His answers were dark, hostile tangents that would not appeal to independent voters. I think that's right. I mean, he let the moderators rattle him. He let her rattle him. But it doesn't take much to rattle Trump. Again, a man of no self-esteem. So, yeah, he lost it. It wasn't caused by anybody. It was caused by his personality, by his inability to stay focused, by his lack of discipline. Proper. When I debate in high school, even we were held to high standards. If you talked out of turn, it was an instant loss. If you didn't directly answer a question, you would lose a ton of points. Yes, I mean, high school debate is rigorous, it's real. You have to make a point, you have to make an argument, you have to deal with the question being asked. Yeah, I mean, if you couldn't hold politicians to that standard, they would fail dramatically. They would all be kicked off the stage. Anonymous Doe. I live in Puerto Rico, which has the massive benefit of you're not allowed to vote for president. If you're an American citizen who is a resident of Puerto Rico, you're literally not allowed to vote for president, which is great because I don't have to choose. Now, you could ask me if I lived in the United States who I'd vote for. And my guess is that I would stay home. I mean, I probably would go vote, but not vote for president. I would leave that blank. It's just not worth it. My vote doesn't make that much difference. And it just from a purely emotional sense, since it doesn't make any difference, voting for either one of these candidates feels dirty. If I had to. But since I don't have to, I would vote for neither one. Henry, other than being pro-oil, is there any reason to vote for Trump? At least Kamala is for abortion rights. A Kamala win might force rethink in GOP. Yeah, I think that Trump will probably not raise your taxes. Kamala will try. Trump will probably deregulate at the regulatory agency level. Kamala will not. Kamala will increase regulations. She'll keep the regulatory regime as it is now with Biden, which is terrible. So, yeah, I mean, there are a number of reasons why you wouldn't want to vote for Kamala because of primarily her economic policies. But I agree, she is pro-abortion, which is a big one. Trump is better on energy. But look, the reality is that we produce more oil and gas today in the United States than any point in our history, in spite of Biden, and that would probably continue. That would probably continue with regard to with Kamala. I don't think she'd stop that, but she would try to raise taxes. I'm not sure she'd be successful because she wouldn't have the House and Senate. She will try to increase regulations. The regulatory regime will be tough. It'll be a tough 4 years, but it's going to be a tough 4 years either way, because Trump's tariffs are more destructive than I think anything Kamala is proposing. I'll say it again. Economically, from purely economic perspective, Trump's tariffs alone are more destructive. Weigh all that and figure out who to vote for. Enric, recommendation, have a second local recording when connections are spotty, so there's a complete recording to publish. Has a complete recording on a local drive. So I could record the whole thing, but usually when it stops, I usually stop. I usually end the show, so I don't keep going. So there's not a lot of difference between the two. And like there, I lost the sound, so then I repeated the whole thing. So there's no point in putting up a recording with both me saying it twice. Oh, Paul. Thank you, Paul. Well, $4 from the goal. We'll call it a night. Peter. No, I didn't see it. That's horrible. I'll have to watch it now. That is really horrible. I thought Peter Zane was better than that. But it doesn't really surprise me because he's a pragmatist, right? It's what works. He thinks that works. He thinks. Shocking. But yes, I think Peter Zane would probably support the Chinese model for some countries. Jeremy says, thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. And Alex says, Yaron, can you answer again? There's no, oh, I did that. I did answer it again. And then Andrew just came in. Silvanos gave $5. Thank you, Silvanos. That got us over the top. And then Andrew asks a final question. Would you credit fracking as the essential driver for the country's economic growth over the past 5 years? I'd say more than the last 5 years, 10 years. Fracking has been essential to keeping the price of energy in the United States relatively low, cheap. But look, I think the fundamental driver of the U.S. economy over the last 20 years is tech. Those two things, I'd say fracking and tech, are the things that have driven the U.S. economy, that have made it successful. Think of Apple, think of NVIDIA, think of this whole category, new category of chips, and now they're going to be gazillion of these chips made. Think of AI and a whole new industry being born, and the amount of data centers that are going to be built now, and the amount of work that's going to create, and the amount of productivity enhancement that's going to be about. Tech is the ultimate driver of increased productivity, which is the ultimate driver of the rising standard of living. Facilitating that, making all that possible, is cheap energy, and that's where fracking comes in. So it's a combination of fracking. If you just had fracking and no tech, we'd stagnate. If you just had tech and no fracking, you wouldn't have as high of a standard of living. The fact that we have both is what keeps the U.S. going. And notice how hostile Republicans are to the tech, to Silicon Valley, to AI, to artificial meat, to biotech, to tech, and how hostile the Democrats are to fracking. So each one wants to kill us in a different way. All right, everybody, and tech is under huge government attack right now. Big tech, at least, is tech, and Biden has just embraced that even more fully than Trump did. But both political parties are anti-big tech. All right, everybody, thank you. I appreciate all the support. I appreciate the super chat. I will. I think this arrangement with battery on my microphone. That's why I have to take care of that and consider the fact that it's running out of batteries faster than I thought it would. But that can be taken care of. So I expect to do a show tomorrow. So I will see you all tomorrow, approximately same time, maybe now earlier. But have a great rest of your day. Have a great tomorrow. See you tomorrow.